Here we go. Right. Recording. We are recording today's event. Welcome, everybody. This is the New Digital Alliance July quarterly meeting. We're glad to have you all here joining us for today's session. Today's meeting, we're going to welcome everybody in here, and then we've got a guest speaker panel that will be talking to us about sort of that, how are we bringing back our resources back into the office? Are we bringing them back into the office? And what might that work environment look like now that we'll be working with hybrid teams and work within our organization? And I'm going to ask everybody to mute their microphones so we don't get any cross chatter on the communication. Keeping in mind, the event is being recorded, so whatever you say might be made public. All right, and then we'll be wrapping up. We'll share a few dates upcoming if it might be of interest for you. All right, so first off, we want to thank all of our investors. The companies you see here on this slide, as well as the organizations you see here, are all heavily involved with the Alliance, and their funding makes everything like this event today possible, as well as many of the things you'll see later on in today's presentation. Before we get too much further though, I would like to invite Pat Rothy to say a few words about Grace.
So thanks everybody for joining, and I want to thank Grace for her time with the Alliance. She joined us as a freshman and is an example of the Youth Apprenticeship Program. I'd say a pretty good success story of the Youth Apprenticeship Program. She's been intern for a couple of years with the Digital Alliance, and at the same time she actually spent a year with Secura. You know, she started out to maintain the back end of our websites and keeping things up to date, and then she helped make the website a little bit more engaging. Reaching out actually to peers and parents to see what they want to know about IT and careers. So very proactive in trying to understand how to transform it. She also assisted with data analytics and search engine optimization, learning from our college intern, and then also teaching the college intern how to write HTML. So very collaborative from that perspective. And then before transitioning off to the Alliance to focus more on our youth apprenticeship at Secura, she helped onboard the new college intern as well as her replacement. So I just want to thank Grace, and unfortunately due to COVID, I've not had a lot of interaction with Grace, but I've heard some really great things about what she's done, and I'm wishing her the best in her career as she moves on through both at Secura here with the next phase and great things beyond that as she moves into her college career and her future. So thanks, Grace, for everything you've done, and looking forward to seeing what you do in your professional career.
And I'll double that. So I've failed to introduce Pat. Pat is CIO at Plexus. He is also our executive committee chair for the New Digital Alliance. So thank you, Pat. Grace, I think you are on the call. You want to just say hi so everybody can kind of see you on their screens?
Hello, I'm Grace.
And I double everything that Pat says. Thank you so much for all of your help over the last 2 years, Grace. We've been blessed to have you as part of the New Digital Alliance team. And Secura,
thank you.
Lucky to have you on board.
I just want to say thank you for taking on a high school student. I know at the time when you were, when I sort of reached out, you didn't have any high school interns. So I know you kind of like took a leap into the dark a little bit. But I just want to say thank you for like taking that big jump, because it really helped me, develop my career, develop my skills. So I just want to say thank you for that.
You're quite welcome. All right, well, appreciate that. Thank you, Pat, for joining, and also for volunteering to thank Grace for us.
Second, though, this is an example of how well it can work. So thanks again, Grace.
All right, kind of moving on, we want to welcome aboard our new board members. Sherry Stino is replacing Sarah Jansen from Thrivent Financial. Sherry is the IT Vice President of Enterprise Technology Solutions. We've also like to welcome on Jack Brown, Director of Business Intelligence at Secura Insurance, and responsible now for the Youth Apprenticeship Program at Secura, which Grace is part of. And just to kind of bring you folks up to speed on what the Alliance has been up to since we last met in April. In the K-12 space, if you remember, we have sort of three pillars of audiences. We have K-12, we have higher ed, and we have professional space. In that K-12 space, we have recently come on board with the DPI's Computer Science State Planning Work Group. We are working to develop a computer science framework for the state of Wisconsin. Likewise, we've got a chat coming in here. All right. Heather says, thank you to Grace. Likewise, we have started working with TEALS and SISTE on a computer science teacher licensure cohort, which we are looking to launch in October. One of the challenges we face here in the state of Wisconsin is we have graduated fewer than 6 computer science teachers in the state in the last 5 years. Likewise, 50% of our school districts in Wisconsin offer computer science, but only 50% of those teachers are even certified to be teaching. And this is a challenge because if the DPI decides to come in and shut down these or check those licensures, they can actually shut down those classrooms that are teaching, leveraging a teacher who is not certified to be delivering that course content. So by working with TEALS and SISTE, we are hoping to change that paradigm. We have connected with Microsoft. They are going to fund the first 10 teachers in our cohort through that program. So $200 a teacher. We really appreciate that funding from Microsoft, and which will allow us to help those teachers come through the cohort and also defer the cost of their licensure exam at the end of this. At the college level, we are getting ready to launch our Fall Tech Talk series. So we'll be reaching out to our investor organizations for speakers to get in front of our college students and share information about their companies, their IT departments, and so forth. It's a great way for our investors to connect with upcoming talent and market their organizations and IT units at the same time. We're also working with the UW Oshkosh. They are launching a cybersecurity center of excellence. We just heard today that they have received final notice of which location they'll be in and are simply waiting to get the keys to the door. And they'll be building that Cyber Center of Excellence in mid-August and opening the doors in September. At the professional level, we continue to share resumes. We've also got our upskilling, reskilling roundtable that's running. Next meeting is already next Tuesday. We hope you're able to join us for that. And a couple of the new things that we're working on, ITYA onboarding framework and an ambassador program. With the onboarding framework, we have more students who are looking for youth apprenticeship opportunities in IT than we have companies offering positions. So working with Secura, as they've just are a year into their youth apprenticeship offerings, we're working to create a framework that will help other companies jumpstart that program. What we heard from Secura was there's very little employer-focused material. So how do you as an employer get going with this? So we want to create that playbook for them and make it available not only to Secura, but to other companies throughout Northeast Wisconsin and even sharing it across the state. Benefits of starting a youth apprenticeship opportunity at your organization include things like it'll help you build some leadership skills amongst your team members who become mentors for those youth apprentices. And of course, by taking on a youth apprentice like Grace, you're helping skill up the future IT workforce. So, and that's just a couple of the many, many benefits of starting such a program. All right, that is a very brief update on the Alliance, and I meant to keep it brief because I really want to bring in our panel speakers now. We have a great lineup today. We have Amy Saborin from Associate. Wow, I cannot read. It's been a thing all day.
Recording in progress.
So go ahead. Oh, I thought I heard somebody. So Amy Saborin is the VP of HR and Associate Services at JJ Keller and Associates. And she's been providing HR value-added service and support to leaders and associates at JJ Keller for a number of years. We will be posting her full bio along with that of our other speakers on our website early next week. Brian Lindo joins us from Secura, where he is the Director of Information Technology, and amongst other things, has leadership of their information security teams, infrastructure, operations, and support services. And joining them today is Heather Turner-Lowe, who is a practice leader at Epstein Ewan Architect down in Milwaukee. She brings in years of experience across the architecture, engineering, and I'm not sure what the C in that one stands for, industry, architecture, engineering, construction management, project management, and business development. So welcome, panelists. We are thrilled to have you here today. I am going to stop sharing my desktop simply so we can see the panelists as they start speaking. And then, whoops, I need to get the right spot here. There we go. That way we can see them in speaker view if you wish to change your view to that. So welcome, panelists. Thank you for joining us today. Amy, I'm gonna start with you. We kind of talked last week a little bit, and different companies are different states in their journey back into the to work pathway.
Kim, you had shut down for a moment there. I know you teed me up, and are you just asking the journey and that we took to get to remote work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So how is JJ Keller handling back to work?
Okay, back to work. When we were, it was probably about 6 years ago that we really were focusing on the concept of flexible work. So at JJ Keller, historically, that might have been flexibility in the work day, the work hours, or the work location. And it started out that we might have a valued associate who was moving out of the area and we wanted to retain them. And then it really moved to just a challenge to get talent within the organization. And so we were trying to get our leaders to be more open to having remote work. So it really evolved over those 6 years. And at the point of the pandemic hitting, we had about 40% that were working remotely. So we were able to test it, and it was well tested over that time period. But then we still had a challenge of just getting everybody home from 40% to 90% over a 2-day period. And I'm sure that everyone can relate to that. But early on, it seemed like some companies had that crystal ball where they were just able to say, we're not going to return to the office in 2020. And we weren't so sure. So we just took on a cadence of regularly communicating to our associates. So, we were in a position to say, when we looked at our policy, you were no longer required to have alternative childcare until September came through, for example. So people kind of always had a 3-month lookout in regards to return to work, but then we would just push it. We were just trying to keep a pulse on what was going on. But ultimately in February, we did announce that anyone who chose to come back to the office, we'd look for them to do so by July 1st of this year. So at that point, we were comfortable that people would have an opportunity to be vaccinated. The 90% that had been remote in early 2020 had the opportunity to complete their application to be remote permanently. And so between probably May of 2020 and the time that people returned to the office on their own choice in July, of 2021, we had gone from 50% who thought they would want to stay remote to actually 73%. So that's where we stand now. I think a plus for us being able to return is that no one was required to. Not only were they not required to, but we had so many that elected to stay home that were really well spaced. So people can really flex to the comfort level that work for them and their families.
Very nice. Now, Brian, you know, you're representing Secura. What do things look like at Secura from a back to work perspective?
Sure. Well, good afternoon. Yeah, we're on our last phase. So we started returning people to our building kind of in mass after the 4th of July in 3 waves. We're on the final wave right now, kind of by floor, just from a logistics standpoint to get people. But we define coming back as a hybrid of you're in the office 3 or more days a week. So we still have lots of flexibility for people working working from home on Fridays or Mondays. And a lot of times it's team dependent. The teams will say, hey, everybody's going to be back in Tuesday, Wednesdays. We'll have our team meetings. And it's kind of up to the team to decide that. But we're kind of in our final wave of returning to the building. And tomorrow afternoon, we have a nice big celebration, with all the executives to welcome everybody back, basically.
Excellent. Now, what are things looking like down in Milwaukee at Epstein UN Architects, Heather? How are you guys coming back?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the majority of the pandemic, we were probably running around 15 to 20% of our folks were still coming in. We were targeting this fall to bring everyone back full time. Just again, based on kind of where things were at in terms of the vaccination. But early spring, late spring, we were taking a look at that again and felt let's bring everybody back June 1st, based on again where the vaccination rates were. And at the end of the day, we're in a business that designs spaces for people to come together. So for us to be designing spaces from our homes didn't really make much sense for what we believe in and what we're designing for. And we work in a pretty collaborative process between teams, between senior designers to junior designers. And so it's really important for our team members to be together. So we did survey our team members. I want to say this was probably early winter of this year. We did get feedback that people were looking for additional flexibility within their schedules. We also heard loud and clear that people were missing kind of those interactions, the knowledge sharing that happens between teams and between individuals within the work environment. So we struck a little bit of a balance. We are offering 1 day flexibility, but it's not a set day, and it's really geared around what makes the most sense from a client perspective. So if you want to take off a Friday, well, if there's a client meeting or even an in-house team meeting that requires collaboration, maybe adjust that flex day to a different day. And we've really kind of empowered the teams within the individual studios to work with one another to determine how they're going to communicate those days off. So really kind of putting that trust and empowerment back into our employees. So it's been great. I was really thrilled. We had a studio meeting in our workplace specific studio about 3 weeks ago. And one of our younger associates, he was sharing that he had some hesitations coming back, and he felt like, well, geez, I can work from my home. I can do the design and those types of things. But now being back, he's like so excited that he's back because he didn't realize how much he missed that collaboration with his colleagues, and that he has a simple question. He could just walk over to the desk next to him and have that quick conversation. And so, I don't know, that touched my heart personally, because that's, I think what everybody was kind of thinking before they came back. Now that we're all back, they're like, gosh, this is amazing to be back. So that's where we're at in Milwaukee, and all of our offices are kind of operating the same way. We actually happen to be moving our Denver office up a couple floors. So they are not back in the office quite yet, but they will all be coming back once that build out's complete.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you on the call today, if you have questions, feel free to, send a note in the chat throughout. We'll phase those into the panel discussion here. Otherwise, we will also open up more fully for Q&A kind of a little bit later in the session. But if you have something in the meantime that you want to ask our panelists, feel free to send it in the chat. So Heather, you mentioned office and bringing folks back and even moving your Denver folks up a couple floors, which kind of makes me wonder, what are some of the trends that you guys are starting to see in office layout due to the pandemic and due to the increased hybridization of our workforce?
Mm-hmm. Well, Kim, I think when we were talking earlier, I hate the word trends. So I never want to advocate for an organization to follow a trend, because truly organizations should look at what are we trying to accomplish as a business, as an organization, what's our culture, and then how do we best align our space and technology to achieve those and to get the results that we're looking for. So I will say, are there things that we're starting to see trends? Sure. And it would be maybe these three. So technology infused environments. So more of the plug and play, more of the smart building technologies that help people, get into a conference room, and maybe the PowerPoint, the lighting, the HVAC is kind of adjusted for their liking. I think we'll start to see an increase of that. And that's really that hospitality plug and play model. I think we will begin to see progress flexibility. So do teams, individuals have the ability to flex environments more than maybe they did pre-pandemic? And does the office lend itself to flexibility for, the either shrinkage of teams, expansion of teams or departments, that kind of thing. But even if we need to innovate, like what are those flexible environments that we can get into quickly? And then the third thing that I would, again, that I think would trend, that we were even seeing pre-pandemic, but I think because of the pandemic, it's really got a lens around it, is wellness, and how is a holistic wellness of an individual supported within the work environment. So a lot of people had the fitness centers, which was great. But how are we really going to get these more activated for our employees? How do we make them feel safe and secure within the environment, from HVAC quality to the lighting that they have access to outdoor spaces? We're seeing a lot of interest in outdoor spaces, especially again, because of the pandemic. So technology, flexibility, wellness, I think are some three key areas that we'll see bubble up since the pandemic.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And now, Brian, Heather mentioned kind of that smart workplace, and that kind of leads right into, all sorts of cyber questions in my mind. So what are you seeing as far as, remote work and even the hybridization of that workforce? What are some things we need to be thinking of and sharing with our employees in cyber safety, and what kind of impacts is that having on our organizations?
Yeah, I think we faced a lot of that at the beginning of the pandemic, with some organizations having to rush to a remote workforce and not doing it securely, and kind of paid the price by not being prepared with VPN and preparing their employees for that. I think companies have overcome that. I think the challenge now is going to the hybrid. It's getting to saying, hey, we're going to have a mixture in meetings of people on site and remote. And now typically people are in their homes, but now they could be on vacation. They could be sitting at Starbucks. They could be, they have to be aware, the remote people have to be aware of their environments that may not be under their control, Wi-Fi, and you name it. And in the building, we face, just making it all inclusive, like this meeting, where we're all kind of the same, and there's not a group that's kind of in charge around a table and inside of an office building, and making sure we have the technology in the room that supports it, so you can hear everyone, you can see people as best as their abilities, and just being sensitive to now having this hybrid going forward, where we're not going to have everyone in the building all the time, and everyone's not going to be remote all the time. But security is also always going to be top of mind. But I think a lot of the companies have figured it out a good way to do it. Now we just got to change as workplaces change.
So do you have any best practices to share for folks who are working from their home office? To keep safe and not kind of share all the corporate secrets?
Well, it depends if you're using your own personal equipment, you're keeping it safe as possible as well, which is the normal things of keeping it updated and patched as well. And especially when you have multiple people using one computer to make sure you're shutting down things and not leaving things laying around for others to share. But typically at home, I don't get too worried about it. It's usually now when we get people back on the road, when they're in hotel rooms or in uncontrolled environments.
Hey, Brian, I might add, talking with one of our hospitality clients, they were talking about the design of a hotel room and even the placement of a prospective camera in that room, and then where the angle of the bed and possibly even providing the lighting up at the front. I just thought that was quite fascinating that even in the hotel industry, they're thinking through kind of the remote worker and what that office setting looks like from a hotel room perspective. So
right, yeah, because the person in the hotel room might not want others to know they're in a hotel room, right? And the lighting is so important. So no, that's great to have those design criteria up front to say, hey, where are we going to put the desk? It's going to be closer to the window. That's really interesting. And maybe be hardwired instead of Wi-Fi, those kind of things also will come into play just for performance as well.
So Amy, what are some of the HR policies that folks might want to consider with regards to, working remote? And as we kind of talked about last week, even some of those concerns folks might have, those who are working remote might have about, calling in sick, or how is working remote going to impact my advancement opportunities within the organization?
Guten Tag. I'm on a call.
I think that
I'm almost done.
Can y'all mute, please?
I think Brian really had a good call out when he was talking about hybrid. Usually when we're talking about hybrid, from my perspective, it's, is someone going to be in the, work remote 100% of the time, or is it going to be partial? But I think some of those challenges really come in from a technology standpoint when you have some in the office and some in the home environment. So just getting that down pat, it's kind of the new wave of challenges. Going from 100% office to 100% remote really wasn't that challenging because we were all in the same boat. In regards to best practices, I think some practices and learnings that have come out of it is very early on, we were concerned with just the cultural and people losing contact. So we just made a rule right off the bat that all meetings, videos were going to be on, and the dress policy applied. Anything that you see on camera was fair game for the dress policy. So we tried to get out in front of that just so that connections happened. And we did find that some people who were super extroverted, who were practically in tears when they were sent home, really feel that connection because they were able to, have it virtually, and it felt just as rich. Some things that we really learned was that there are more jobs than we thought could be successful working from home. At J.J. Keller, we certainly had field sales and consulting, developers and things like that. But when everyone was forced to go home, it forced us just to think more broadly and realize there's so many more roles that it worked with, and probably most importantly, that it worked for leaders to lead remotely. We certainly had a lot of parameters in place where individual contributors could work from home, but not necessarily those leaders. So once we made that huge gap, our leaders throughout the organization were much more comfortable hiring remotely. So it really opened up from a talent acquisition perspective, just not being limited geographically. But then it also pushed us from an HR perspective to start looking at those geographic pay differentials and having a formal policy in place. It's easy to have a one-off plan, when you have a handful, but once you have such a big portion of your work that is working outside of the, your current state, then it really pushes you to look at some of those challenges as well. When I think about advancement, I think that was something that was always out there, even as companies were making remote or hybrid situations available to people. It was an opportunity maybe to step back a little bit, keep your foot in, but people were very leery about advancement. And I think this is one of those huge positive outcomes that come out of the pandemic. It's nice to look for those. But when everyone was forced to go remote, we still had the advancements happen. So we can see that they're working. But I think it's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on as more people feel comfortable and come back into the office just because they're comfortable in doing so. It could sway back the other way. So today's environment, I think, is very positive for advancement and having those opportunities. But I think it's something to be very conscious about, making sure it doesn't revert back.
So you mentioned remote work, and recently there's been a couple of articles in the news about companies and how they're handling remote work. Google was one of them, where as they're working remotely, and employees are now maybe moving out of those high cost areas to lower cost cities and towns, they're getting salary adjustments accordingly. Although there's some talk that maybe one of their senior executives who's moving to a lower cost country may not be seeing a salary adjustment. So how is JJ Keller handling that? And what are you seeing and hearing from your HR counterparts?
Certainly when we look at geographic pay, where I believe we're going is really looking regionally. So when you look at, we may be from, Neenah, Wisconsin, but when we look at where our competition for talent is, it's probably more Midwest. So I think long-term, we're going to have, be paying more like the Chicago area. And I think we'll get to having probably like 6 to 8 regional hubs. But in the shorter term, I do see that happening as people move from one area to the next. You can't just flex up that quickly. You can't just across, have an organization suddenly pay for the highest region in their area. So as a company, what we're doing here at JJ Keller is we're looking state by state. And certainly when we're looking at a Texas, for example, we're looking at the fact that there's some very high cost cities there. But anybody in the state of Texas could work anywhere, even in those regions that are very economic to live in, and get a job in some of those higher cost cities. So we're taking a baby step. We're focusing state by state at this point. And yes, there's parameters in place. So if someone's moving from California to Tennessee, there'll be a kickback for a salary review, same way as there would be if someone moved from Tennessee to California. It just gives us an opportunity to look and say, hey, where is someone in that pay band? But it's like I said, it's a step, because I think it will go regionally, and then the regionals will gradually become few and far between.
Thank you. Now, Brian, I know you sat on the committee at Secure that was kind of discussing how you guys would come back and remote work and all of that. Are you seeing some similar salary adapting at Secura?
I don't think I think it's just one factor in the salary determinations. We certainly, over the pandemic, as Amy mentioned, we opened the door to hiring more full-time remote workers than we've ever had before. That we're not necessarily geographically in other countries, generally in the Midwest, but far enough from the home office. They live in Milwaukee, they live in Minneapolis or something like that. They're not going to come into the building. But that's kind of opened it up to a new talent pool that we didn't have access to before. I don't think the salary adjustments, like Amy said, the Midwest was the Midwest. We're going to pay in that pay band and close enough. But I think we're kind of beginning to see the opposite. We're seeing the East and West Coast companies trying to grab Midwest talent at Midwest talent prices because they know they can function remotely. People want to maybe say, hey, I love working at home. I can work for a East or West Coast company, maybe get a nice bump in salary, and they'll come after the highly educated Midwest talent from the East and the West Coast. And I think we're starting to see that already, especially in some of the harder to find jobs that are out there.
Thank you. So as you hire from other regions, you know, how are you at Secura helping your innovation teams and so forth? How are you helping them collaborate and innovate in this hybrid and remote environment that we're finding ourselves in?
Yeah, and you know, it's a challenge. It's doing it a new way. It's getting the right tools. You know, internally we have some teams that are using Microsoft Teams. Other parts, or almost all the company, will use Zoom like we're doing now. Depending on which collaboration tool is working best for that team, and just keeping that contact open all the time. I think each one's figuring it out all by themselves more than corporate saying do it this way. It's really each one's finding their own groove. We're also in the process of switching more from waterfall type projects to agile projects. So you're getting a lot more morning stand-ups, you're getting demos, scrum meetings, those kind of things. So those touch points are getting more frequent, which really will help with innovation in the long run. So I think in our journey, that's really helping in the switch to agile.
Thank you. Heather, now you guys are quite collaborative and innovative in the architecture space as well. Are you, and I'll try not to use the word trends, but that word just wants to flow naturally in this
It's
question.
okay.
You know, how are you seeing that impacting those spaces, you know, in the companies that you're working with when they're, you talked a little bit about a smart room, but what are you seeing as far as now I have part of my team in the office, but the other half of my team is working elsewhere, maybe from the beach. But we have to collaborate on the design of this new building for this customer.
Yeah.
How are you guys handling that? And what are you seeing?
Yeah. I mean, there's no one size fits all. And it's funny because talking through being on panels like this one, being asked this question in terms of the remote employee, the hybrid employee, you know, Yahoo and IBM, they did this experiment several years ago. And I think it was Yahoo's CEO came out and said, look, people are more productive when they're by themselves, but they're more collaborative, more innovative when they're together. And so I think business to business, you know, in terms of how people work and what tools, what spaces they need to do their best work, that is like an individual business by business kind of solution. It should be truly. I think too, when you think about the root of innovation, and I'm a huge Brene Brown fan, so forgive me if you got to look her up if you've not read any of her books, but in her Dare to Lead book, she talks about trust getting built in the small moments. So you think about the times that you bump into a colleague that maybe is from a different department and you talk at the water cooler, let's say, that is a trust building moment. Trust building happens when your colleague steps by your desk and sees a picture, for instance, and you start to talk about your family. There's trust that's built there. So trust is kind of the root of innovation. And so when I look at business by business and how do we help, you know, companies innovate, let's look at those trust building moments that can happen within a work environment, whether that be at the traditional water cooler. I'll just use that as a, you know, hypothetical, but it could be a lot of different places. And then what are those spaces, then what do those tools need to look like? And that really gets into the team's ability to kind of articulate maybe the challenges in how they've worked previously. What are they trying to achieve? How does this impact the overall business objective? So that's the way we kind of look at it from a design perspective. And that's why I joke that I hate following trends, because if there was a silver bullet in this, everybody would be doing it, right? And we wouldn't be asking this question. There isn't a silver bullet. And I think to really help an organization, it should be authentic to that culture, to how an organization's working. So That's my kind of my answer to the innovation question, because every company is kind of grappling with this right now.
All right, so I'm gonna kind of pick at that workspace
Yeah.
questions a little bit. There had been a tendency for companies to kind of lower those cube walls over time in hopes of building
Yes.
and increasing innovation. And some companies went as far as, it almost looked like the cafeteria tables, except for there was a spot for you to like plug your laptop in, and you'd be telling. So you find a spot to sit in the morning when you come in, but you run to that 10 o'clock meeting, and that spot you've been at is now taken by somebody else. You have to go find another spot to go and sit, until lunchtime. Looking in your crystal ball, are you seeing sort of the demise now of hoteling, and those really exceptionally open office spaces, or are they kind of here for evermore?
Oh, wow. Okay, loaded question, but I love it. Bring it on. So hoteling and benching, I think what you're getting at is the benched environment. So the transition from the private office to the benched environment, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why companies were going to that. And let's say from a real estate perspective, heads per square foot, we can get more people into a space. Everybody works the same. Here's your space, go. I think the failure in terms of the open work environment, whether they had short partitions or it was benched or whatever that scenario looks like, was the change management that didn't go along with it. So if I went from a private office and I was used to talking on my phone nice and loud, and I was used to having people connect with me in my office, and now I went out to an open work environment, nobody really helped me understand maybe what those new behaviors wanted to be in that open work environment. So I think some of the pushback, noise levels being one of those things, or at least, okay, now there's an enclave over here for you to go do your loud, noisy collaboration work or your conference calls, whatever those tasks might be. That piece of the puzzle was missing. Post-pandemic, are we seeing more clients go back to, private office everything? No, I don't think people are scrapping that idea altogether. Would we see a lot more clients kind of not want to put in the benched environments? Yeah, I mean, I think, again, if we are really taking a look at how individual teams and departments work, that's a solution that's a lot more real estate heads per square foot focused for companies that are not necessarily that, then they are looking at a mixture of environments for employees to work in, whether it be private offices or it could be a small benched area for a team to get together for a couple weeks at a time, and then they go to a different location. So there's a lot of different scenarios, I think, at play from different organizations. So great question.
I just keep thinking of like the sneeze factor and how many in a benched environment are going to kind of, pick up and move about 20 feet out. Somebody's sneezing.
I would say for companies that are looking at hoteling, let's say, for the employee that maybe comes in 1 or 2 times a week, from a change management perspective, I think some thought needs to be given to how do we help that employee either personalize their space, whether that's even through IT, like maybe there's some monitors on the wall. Hey, so-and-so is in the office today and that person has 3 kids. And I don't know, like some personality to that individual that's coming into the office. Some of that might get lost in a fully kind of remote environment or someone who's just hoteling for a day or 2, helping create some of those connection points for employees who might be more hybrid than the others. Would be something I would recommend to companies to maybe consider.
Good idea. So Brian, I'm going to switch kind of to focus on sort of that remote employee a little bit more. I know there's been some talk within our companies, especially as we first started moving remote, how do we create that sensation of team and culture and onboard our employees who are coming in during this remote time period, feel part of the culture of the company? What kind of technologies, leadership strategies might we be put in place to help with that?
Yeah, that was something that we faced right away is, the vast majority of our leaders were not, trained to lead remote workers, right? So it was learning the strategies. We had some professional development classes that we had for leaders to understand the dynamics of leading a remote workforce, especially immediately. And then of course the remote workforce wasn't used to working remotely either. Obviously communication is key. Again, like somebody mentioned earlier, cameras on, face to face as much as possible. I think we also did more and more when it was safer to do team building. I know we had at our home office, people were using the outdoor space to have happy hours, in the back, where we could social distance at the time. Those kind of things. We're looking for any opportunity to build those relationships as much as possible. Very much like we've always done it in our organization, stressing one-on-ones, having that time to talk about, the family and those kind of things, so it doesn't just go to business right away. And really encouraging leaders to do that. And then also encouraging leaders to ask for help from other leaders who were experienced in this, to say, I have employees that are struggling either with health issues or, having kids at home, is a new dynamic, giving our leaders the ability to say, hey, reach out to HR or have these other resources on tap within our organization that can help employees, so that they can be that conduit to getting employees help so that they don't have to feel like they have to do it all. So I think that really stepped up during the pandemic, where we were utilizing some of these external resources that may not have been used before, but that our leadership team really has to try to help find those resources. So I think we did a pretty good job of that. Now with the hybrid, how will that change? We'll see people more, but we still got to keep that core of trying to just build that communication between our teams.
So Amy, I'm going to kind of pose the same question to you, especially since such a significant portion of the workforce at J.J. Keller will be working at least part of their work week out of the office. What are you guys doing, or what are you seeing as some tools that you'll be implementing to help build that corporate culture moving forward?
We did have, being primarily in the Fox Valley, we had a lot of large events where we would bring everyone on site, or we'd have an event at the PAC. And, not only with the pandemic was it not wise to have large group events, but now that we have such a huge portion remote, within the Fox Valley, as well as beyond that, those type of venues just don't work anymore, because we automatically lose so many. Or it'd be just ridiculously expensive to pull them in for these events. So we're trying to make sure that we're purposely creating, giving tools to our leaders. Like, we're not going to have the company picnic outside or the walking event in September, but here's 3 options, and we're trying to get them comfortable creating small group events. I did one with my team the other day that was online, Amazing Race. So it's just trying to look and make room for a smaller group events, because it's just too easy just to continue on your work and get things done. And then, your home is behind you or 2 feet away and going to that. So I think that truly is a challenge, is to make sure that you're having those connections. It is interesting though, we, for the last 5 years, we've done the Great Place to Work survey, and it's put on by the Great Place to Work Institute. And when you look at the results and cut the data, our remote associates showed that they were very engaged. I think it's just the assumption that when you're not close, you don't have those ties to people. But I think we've proven that there's other areas beyond physical proximity to build up those connections. But I think as an organization, that's a big focus for us, is just to make sure that we focus on it, and we haven't figured it out yet. But we know it's on our bullseye, and we've playing around with ideas, and it's just a matter of sharing them across groups and seeing what's working.
Earlier on, Heather had kind of touched on sort of the wellness factor too. You know, being in HR, how are we helping our remote workers, you know, handle that mental health element that some may struggle with in working from home, even though they may have chosen to continue working in a remote fashion?
We do have a on-site health clinic that is free to our associates. And, you know, unfortunately, we had our new one open in the midst of the pandemic, so it was a little quiet there for a bit. But we did build into that a EAP room where associates during the workday, you know, it looks like they're checking in. Someone doesn't know if they're getting a throat culture or a physical or what have you, or if they're checking into that EAP room. Just to have an opportunity, and that was certainly going to be virtual. So it was connecting to providers virtually and just having a soundproof room and things along that line. What we're in the midst of now, however, is with so many people outside the state of Wisconsin and some of those limitations on serving patients beyond state lines, we're making a switch to a virtual anywhere network. So our vendor has a network that allows our associates to, you know, enact in telemedicine and have those services across state lines. So that was a huge limit when you could think of associates being able to get pharmacy, you know, prescriptions filled on site, and then if you're off site or outside of the area, you couldn't get them. So that's just a hurdle that we're assisting our associates with, whether it's physical medicine or mental behavioral health, just making sure it's available to associates, whether they're on site or virtual, whether they're in Wisconsin or in another state.
Can I just add one thing, Kim?
Yeah, please.
Thought maybe just giving a shout out to the Wellness Council of Wisconsin. For those who are interested in kind of well-being for employees, they've got some great resources on their website. And we took a look at how to kind of shore up our initiatives and I guess maybe market them a little bit more to our employees. So it's all things well-being, from financial to health to physical. And so there's a lot of different buckets. And then in our intranet, we really try to promote, okay, so we're having a financial planning seminar come in, and that's tied to this well-being pillar. Come join us for that. We've got fresh food that we offer on Tuesdays is kind of the physical. And so there's a lot of different things that we're doing that just to remind employees that, look, we care about you. We want to support you in kind of this holistic way. And I think Wellness Council of Wisconsin really helped with some of their resources, helped us kind of shore that up. So I'm going to give them a little shout out.
Oh, thank you for that. So we're nearing the time of the end of our formal panel discussion. So, you know, feel free to, our audience, you know, be thinking of some questions that you might want to ask. But to wrap up my round of questions, I'd like to ask each of our panelists in turn what are 3 things, focusing on the work from home side of your employee pool, what are 3 tips for people to maybe improve their environment working from home? So Heather, I'll start with you.
Whew. All right. Well, I think I touched on one of them, which is the background, although I wanted to highlight our people in office. So I'm sure it's probably distracting watching people come back and forth. But since we were talking about return to office, there they are. But the background, I think, is really important because it can be distracting. I was on a call with somebody and their closet door was open. And so I felt myself like looking in their closet a lot of the time, it was just awkward. So that would be one. I would say from a health and well-being perspective, like turn it off, you know, like find those moments where you need to turn it off. Microsoft had done some analysis on their people during the pandemic, and the time or the amount of IMs sent 6 p.m. to, I think it was like around midnight, was up by like 50+%. So really, how do we turn it off or empower employees to feel okay to turn it off? And then the third item would be like, just get up and move. So give yourself some grace to just get up out of that seat, take a walk. While I was working from home during the pandemic, I got to hand it to my neighbor. I saw him walk by several times a day for a quick 5-minute walk. He was literally walking down to the stop sign, walking back. So I was like, that's awesome. Like get, you know, whatever that is, 100 steps in, get it in. So, or get the sit to stand desk and maybe jog in place, but those would be my 3.
Thank you. Brian, how about you?
Oh, those were good ones, because I was going to say the same thing. I think getting more people comfortable with just putting be right back, you know, turn your camera off for 30 seconds or a minute to say, I'm just going to go walk around the room. I can still hear what's going on. I'm not missing out, but you can, you know, and that's okay to be right back. I also think of sometimes you being with the background in play, but find different places in your home to do it, just to change things up a little bit, you know, can also help. And you know, try different cameras, try different backgrounds to change it up. I know I did in the beginning. I was having, you know, a different background every couple days just to change things up. So then somebody would ask, well, what's that back? You know, showing like family vacation photos for the first 2 months. I know everybody got sick of seeing my family vacation photos, but it gave everybody something to talk about, right? Like, where were you when you were doing this? So I think that just keeping so everyone doesn't get too bored during long days of sitting on Zoom.
All right, thank you. And Amy?
I would have to go back to the video. I think that's really important for connecting with people, that you have that visual connection. I would say be thinking about the backgrounds. You know, we certainly made available the logoed backgrounds, and that's nice if you're in a formal meeting and you don't have to worry what's behind you. But I think it's also a way to help connect with people. We had to tell our associates early on, it's perfectly fine if your dog is barking in the background, your cat comes in front of the video. And I think, you know, sometimes when you have those false backgrounds, you can see the halos around people. So if you're having one-on-ones or less formal meetings, I would encourage people to turn off those formal backgrounds. Again, it helps build those connections. We also had to talk to people about what Heather was saying about just stopping and breathing and having some time for yourselves. So, you know, initially we were encouraging them to go in and have a half-hour meeting and 5 minutes early, or an hour meeting and 10 minutes early. And just recently as an organization, we made a global change because people were just going bang, 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 bang. And you know, all of a sudden their day was over and they hadn't gotten up and stretched or anything along that line. So making sure that they are building in some time for themselves. And then finally, I would say ergonomics. It's scary when you see all the people working from the kitchen table and it's just not the right setup. So, you know, there's so many resources out there, and just finding those for your associate and linking it to them so that they can make sure they have a proper setup at home.
Excellent. I think those are some great tips. And I know I have invested in a stand-up desk myself early on in COVID. I just need to remember to use it more. So, well, thank you. And I see Amy Pierce in the chat has shared a wellness resource here for us. The new mentalhealthconnection.org is the URL that she shared. And she says it's great resource for mental health. There are surveys and initiatives for Northeast Wisconsin. So thank you, Amy, for sharing that. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions from our participants. If you have a question, you can either type it in the chat and I'll read it up on your behalf, or feel free to open up your mic and you know, post it directly to our panelists here.
Kim, I can share. Go ahead. I was just gonna share like a really quick, you know, quiet time filler. You know, Amy, when you were kind of talking about the ergonomics and people sitting at their kitchen tables, and just, I think that's an interesting question for companies to ask themselves if they are looking at more of a standardized approach to where an employee would work long term. Do they have the right setup at home or not? One of our clients, who it's an international client, and they have a lot of colleagues in New York, was sharing a story of one of their colleagues basically working from like the windowsill from the bed because he was in like a really tiny studio apartment. You know, that image has not left my mind in terms of there's probably a lot of scenarios like that in the Midwest, maybe not, but you never know. And so I think as employers are looking at, you know, who should be working from home, who shouldn't, maybe a part of that conversation too is what tools might they need at home? Do they have the right setup in the first place? So I just when you said that, my head went right back to that story you told. I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, that's
Poor
actually
guy.
a great suggestion, Heather, because, you know, I know there's been a lot of discussion on what type of equipment do we send home to our remote workers? And companies are divided on that, at least the ones I've spoken with, but sending home or, emailing them some suggestions and links to, here's how you should be able to sit, 90 degrees at the knees and 90 degrees at the elbow, or whatever those kind of best practices are for your environment. And then tips and suggestions on, a good ergonomic chair, stand-up desk. That can pay dividends. Not only, it's just information, right? And the employee can act on it or not, but it can pay dividends on the health of that employee as well as then for the company. So, and Grace says here, she absolutely had to invest in decent keyboards and mice and probably should have looked at a decent chair. It seems crazy, but often I'd spend 13 hours sitting at my desk between work and school. Exactly. And many IT employees do.
Yeah.
So, and if we've got some recommendations from our HR and health wellness teams, that can shorten the time it takes an employee to find those tools. So,
As an organization, we had, certainly made available a hybrid. So someone, if they wanted to commit to a day, a week in the office, they'd have a workspace. But with so many people going remotely and us giving up the leased buildings, we had a lot of extra stand stations and a lot of extra chairs. So we just had a sale. We just opened it up to, we focused on people in Wisconsin because they had to come pick it up. But we were making, chairs available for $25 and sit stands available for $25. And, we didn't want to store them, and we were converting our on campus. So we were changing colors and having sit stands built into the desk and things along that line. So that went a long way, kept it out of the landfill, gave associates something to look at. One comment, unintended positive out of the pandemic and everyone going remote is we have a much stronger business continuity planning in place. So, if you think back to pre-COVID when you had some of those snowstorms that were so awful and it was hard for people to get to work, we just have it much stronger plan if something was to happen to the corporate campus where people can just work remotely. Don't have all of our eggs in one basket.
So I know school districts are saying similarly. They, gone are going to be the days of a snow day for many of our districts because they'll just flip to that remote teaching model that they've been using for the last year or so. Sorry, kids.
No, I'm like, oh, just let them sled.
All right. Any questions from the group? It's been a quiet audience today. Nope, doesn't sound like it. So I'm going to then thank you to our panelists. Truly appreciate it. A few folks did have to jump off early. All of them have said it's been a great conversation. So thank you so much. I've got one person jumping back in. They must have had to. So thank you for the conversation. Thank you for sharing some of the thoughts and learnings and discussions you've been having within your companies. I am going to just bring my screen back up one last time here, simply because I do have some dates I would like to share with everybody. So kind of as moving into our wrap up here, we do have an upskilling, reskilling roundtable discussion next week. That's on Tuesday morning, July 27th at 8 a.m. if you're interested in participating in that. It's really just an open discussion with our whoever joins the call around some of the challenges you're facing in finding IT talent. We kind of share some of the different opportunities to connect with IT talent here in Northeast Wisconsin, and discuss, who's doing what from a program perspective at our universities and technical colleges. So if you're looking to hire specific skill sets, and then just kind of swap pains and learnings from those who are on the call. So very low key. If you're interested in learning about what's going on in the region from an upskilling, reskilling perspective, feel free to join us on Tuesday. Our next quarterly meeting will be October 14th. This will actually be our Tech Talent Summit. And at that meeting, what we've historically done is shared some of the technology trends. We've shared sort of what's going on in our K-12 pipeline, our higher ed, and then as well as our employer pipeline. And we also invite a group of panelists to talk about things related to the technology talent and trends and things that they're seeing there. So look for more information coming out on that as we get closer to that event. Our next CS Advisory Board meeting is going to be combined with that summit. So we'll be inviting participants from our K-12 districts to sit at the table with us and, share with our corporations some of the challenges they're facing that, they might need your help with. Because truly, if we don't tackle down at the K-12 level and get more students interested in computer science and keep them interested already at that age, they're never going to be graduating out of our IT programs at our colleges and be available for your workforces. And then after that, that next Regional Computer Science Advisory Board meeting is on December 8th. We have our tech talks, like I mentioned earlier. Those are not scheduled yet. We'll be looking to get those on the calendar, and in doing so, looking to our investor organizations for speakers. This gets their companies out in front of college students across the region in a manner that allows them to share what's kind of going on in their IT departments, some of the innovation that they might be doing within their organization, and so forth. Great way to help brand your company and get out in front of your future workforce. And then our new Connect IT event, this is going to be virtual this year. This is where we have historically invited high school students to Lambeau Field and invited then our IT professionals to come and participate as part of the Talent Cafe or part of the career booth area. Last year we were virtual with this. We actually were able to connect with 600 high school students across the state as opposed to the 350 we had bused to Lambeau the year before. And we are going to be virtual again this year, just because it's a little easier in this little slightly uncertain environment we still find ourselves in. So we will be looking for panelists to participate, again, from our investor organizations who will be part of the panels talking with the high school students. And new this year, we're going to be reaching out to our investors to do a little bit of video footage, kind of introducing their organization and a role within their organization. Secura Insurance, we already have a great video from their CIO who did it for his daughter's 8th grade class. And so we're going to use that video to help educate our students on what a CIO does. So we'll be looking to our investors to help create videos similarly around the other IT roles. And that will be sent out as pre-work to the students to help them then develop questions that they can ask in those virtual sessions with our IT professionals and hiring managers. So look for invitations around participation in those events coming up. I had another thought I wanted to share. I can't remember it at the moment. It has just gone out the back door. So if I think of it, I do have emails for all of you who have registered for today's event. So I will email out with that. If you are wondering what all is going on, not only for the Alliance, but also regionally with other IT organizations, we encourage you to go out to our website, which is newdigitalalliance.org. And on our event page, we do link out not only to our own events, but to other events for organizations such as the AITP women in technology, and many others here in Northeast Wisconsin. We also, that's what it was. I encourage you to sign up for our monthly newsletter as well if you haven't done so already. This is a great way to stay abreast of what the Alliance is up to, as well as what those other things that are technology related that are going on in the region, are just kind of stay connected with the technology space here in Northeast Wisconsin. So with that, that is the last of my slides, other than just more information can be found here about our advisory board and other areas. So lots of great information out on the website if you haven't been there. Thank you all very much for participating in today's event. Huge round of applause, and thank you again to our panelists. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, everybody.